folks, it's Friday night story time. Sit back, relax, and enjoy the show.
Egyszer elért egy körtefán. Azt mondja a körtefa neki. Engem a száraz ágattól, hogy engemet megtisztogatsz, jó tettedért kaphatsz.
Sziasztok mindenkinek, üdvözöljük csütörtök éjszaka történeti idő. Tonight we are going to read part 2, második rész of the Hunor és Magor legenda, as written by Kate Sarady. You remember her from last week. Hungarian woman, born in 1899, 1899, moves to New York in the 1920s, just after World War I, becomes a children's book author, retells the stories of her homeland to American children. The White Stag, it wins the Newbery Medal in 1937, prestigious award for children's books. And the story is the story of Hunor and Magor. Last time we left off, their father, the King Nimrod, in Scythia, he's just died. And they have gone after this magical, miraculous deer. In Hungarian, it's called the Csodaszarvas, the miraculous stag. And now they come back, they tell all the people about the beautiful land they have seen, and we're heading into part 2, the twin eagles of Hador. But before we get started, I've got here, believe it or not, some Hungarian whiskey, the Vaddisno on the front of the bottle. Vaddisno, if you know what it means in Hungarian, please put it in the comments. Vaddisno Magyarul. This is from Gevertz, which is sort of like this southwesterly, I think, fairy tale-like wood with lots of deers in it, lots of miraculous stags in the Gevertz forest, in the Gevertzi Erdő. And this whiskey, my friend gave it to me. Hungarian whiskey, never saw it, never heard of such a thing. 48% alcohol, Gevertz Hungarian grain whiskey. And I have some coffee, a little bit of a pick-me-up before the story. So you've heard of Irish coffee. Today we're going to have some Magyar kave. Oh, egészségedre. Would you like a drink, Ray? All right. For Varázslatos Ray. Ray the Wizard. Egészségedre. TV will turn off automatically. Please press OK to keep your TV turned on. 42 seconds. 41. 40. 39. 38. Can he make it? Can he make it? Can he make it? All right. He made it. Egészség. Oh, look at this, by the way. I picked this up at an antiquarium on the way here. Budapest Anno. It's some sort of like ancient Budapest centric history book. 1,000 forints, $3 for this whole thing. Crazy. Anyway, we'll look through that another time. Hope I don't break it. And now we are on to the twin eagles of Hador, part 2. Oh, we got a comment right here. So the boar means Vaddisno. Vaddisno in Hungarian is boar. Right on the front of the bottle there. Gevertz Hungarian grain whiskey. Vaddisno boar, but now we're more about the twin eagles of Hador. In Hungarian, the ikrek shas, the shash ikrek, the twin eagles. And away we go. Please feel free throughout the reading. If you have any comments, questions, concerns, please put them into the Beszélgetés Soba. And as always, you can talk with me now. Budapest.fm/Willie. If anyone wants to come on video and discuss, feel free. Szabad. All right. Itt menjünk. The untamed wilderness closed on the broad path, broken by fire and crushed by sharp hoofs of horses. Fresh green sprouts grew on charred roots, vines covered deserted camping grounds. Black bear, fekete medve, and tawny mountain lions stalked their prey once more, unmolested by hunters. Snow fell, and the last traces of men were covered with a thick white blanket. The people of Hunor and Magyar had left the headlands of wild Altainula forever. The snow-capped peaks had looked at their coming and going with indifference. In 12 moons, they had forgotten them. To the everlasting mountains, they meant no more than the passing of dry leaves blown by the wind. But the people had not forgotten the mountains, nor had they forgotten old Nimrod. The memory of his strength was like an armor around them. Their belief in Hadur like a magic sword. Nothing could resist. Wild beasts prowling in the wilderness, hostile spirits hovering in mountain caves, hot sun blistering the plains, roaring rivers or howling blizzards were powerless against the tribe. Relentlessly, they pressed on toward the promised land. Hunor and Magyar became worthy successors to their father. They led the tribe safely to the gentle hills by the misty blue lake. For years they stayed there, undisturbed, gaining in strength and numbers. In the most beautiful spot, the Leg Yunyurubhai of the new land, they built the altar. There, fragrant herbs of the field were burning day and night. Fragrant is a word that means to smell. And fragrant, it has a positive connotation because fragrance is something that we associate with perhaps a perfume or the scent of cologne, a fragrant smell. So a connotation is when a word takes on a certain meaning, and the word fragrant, the fragrant herbs of the field, you can hear right there, it has a positive meaning. It smells delicious, perhaps. The fragrant herbs of the fields were burning day and night. There, great festivals were held every spring, when the ever-smoldering embers were stirred into roaring flames, when offerings of game and fruit were brought to Hadur. Then every man, woman, and child would gather and listen to the minstrels as they sang of the past and of the future. Old songs, wailing, sinister, like the voice of hostile spirits in the wilderness of Altain Ula. New songs full of joy and laughter, like the laughter of good fairies who lived by the misty blue lake, rousing songs full of faith of the coming of Attila. The story of the white stag became a song too, a song everyone knew by heart. And there was the silent question in every heart. Would the white stag come again to lead them toward the promised land? Then one day, Hunor and Magyar saw the white stag again. They had been away all day on a hunt. Descending darkness found them still far away from camp. They spurred their horses on for it. Was not wise for any man to spend the ghost hour in the woods. They rode as fast as they dared through the thick, dark forest, but the ghost hour was upon them. Green-eyed owls, Zuld Semu Bagoyok, restless spirits of wicked men, hooted at them from the branches. Wild cats Vadmachka snarled in the underbrush. To snarl is, well, to make a sound like an angry cat. And lichens, hoof marks of the devil shimmered on old tree stumps. Gray mist crawled from the damp ground, blotting out paths and landmarks. The forest grew denser, blocked paths, brambles tore at them, hanging vines caught at them. Hunor and Magyar reined in their trembling horses and peered around, trying to penetrate the darkness. They knew that they were lost in this strange, ghostly forest. Suddenly, Hunor exclaimed, "Look, brother, to your right, the white stag." Shimmering white against the dark trees stood the stag, not far away. He seemed to float on the rolling mist, to move with it slowly, silently away. "Follow him," whispered Magor, and his words echoed from the trees in the suddenly friendly forest. Follow him, follow him, follow him, follow him. Thorny branches coiled out of the way, and vines crept back to let them through. Away in sight, but never letting them nearer, moved the white stag, silently. Trees fell behind. Now they were riding on a grassy hill. A brook tinkled like silver bells, and the breeze sang sweeter than the flutes of minstrels. A cluster of white birches gleamed at the top of the hill. There the white stag turned to look at Hunor and Magor. Then they lost sight of him. When they reached the trees, he was nowhere in sight, but the sounds of bells and singing grew stronger. Now it seemed to come from the quivering silvery leaves of birches, such a lilting, luring, magic sound that they stopped to listen. Do you hear laughter and singing, brother? Asked Hunor. Do you see fairies dancing, brother? Asked Magor. So right now, Hunor and Magor, they've taken their people out of their ancient home, where their father Nimrod was the king. And they take them on this journey, and they rest for a while, waiting for this white stag to come back and lead them to a new land, to this promised land that Hunor and Magor had themselves found on this previous occasion. And they're here out on a hunt as their people are resting by the riverside in this new settlement that they've created. I think in the Hungarian history, this is somewhere amongst this sort of steppe lands of Ukraine or of Western Russia. They're resting, they're recovering, and they're waiting to go into the Carpathian Basin, into the promised land where this white stag is allegedly leading them. Of course, they don't know what the Carpathian Basin is at this point, but that's some of the imagery that's going on here. So Hunor and Magor, these two brothers, they now have the shared responsibility. They used to be concentrated in the all-powerful figure of their massive, hulking father, Nimrod. And now they're here following and trying to search for this white stag to lead their people to this so-called promised land. Please feel free to drop any comments if you would like to discuss. We're here live. We can talk. Budapest.fm/Willie. And away we go to follow this stag some more. As if their questions had drawn a veil from their eyes, an enchanting scene opened before them. The white birch trees formed a ring, enclosing a smooth green carpet of grass and flowers. Dancing in this ring were two beautiful maidens, fair as none whom Hunor and Magor had ever seen before. Their long hair was pale gold like the new moon. They wore wreaths of flowers in their hair and were clad in pure white garments. All around, under the trees, sat gay little dark men, coaxing sweet music out of their reed pipes. The eyes of Hunor and Magor flashed together. Moon Maidens, whispered Magor. Moon Maidens, those strange changeling fairies who lived in white birch trees and were never seen in the daylight. Moon Maidens who, if caught by the gray hour of dawn, could never go back to fairyland again, Tundeshfuld. Moon Maidens, who brought good luck to men. We must detain them. The ghost hour is waning, whispered Hunor. Silently, they dismounted and tiptoed closer to their dancing fairies. They were inside the ring of trees when a shivering sigh went through the branches and the music stopped abruptly. Somewhere a cock crowed. The two fairies stood motionless in the ring, gazing at Hunor and Magor with frightened eyes. A scurrying, scampering sound came from the underbrush, where the little dark musicians had been but a moment ago. Now there were only gnarled roots and dead stumps of trees. Gnarled, G-N-A-R-L-E-D. The G is silent. If something is gnarled, it's like a root, twisted, sort of notched. It's like you can see it, one of those little bulbs at the bottom of a rough tree. It's gnarled and its roots and its dead stumps. The two brothers smiled at the maidens and spoke to them gently. Hunor held out his hand. One of the maidens touched it with her fingers. Her touch was cool and light, as if a bird's wing had brushed his hand. She turned to her sisters and said something in a strange language. Now they seemed to have lost their fear, because they smiled and let Hunor. Oh, look at this. We got a picture here. You can see the Moon Maidens. This beautiful 1930s illustrations done by the author herself, Kate Sarady. Really a jack of all trades. Or I guess she would be a queen of all trades. The little men playing their reed pipes in this quite, well, seemingly orgiastic scene that's about to envelop or develop. Let's see where we go. I don't know who this is. We got a little boy. Maybe this is one of the little reed boys calling out from the woods there. At the sight of the animals, they gave a little surprised laugh and exclaimed with joy when they were lifted into the saddle. The first rays of the sun cut a shimmering path through the trees. In the distance, Hunor and Magor could see the dark blue of the lake and pale blue of thin columns of smoke rising from many campfires. A lark shot into the air and burst into song, the sweet silver song of the lark. White daisies and blue cornflowers opened sleepy eyes to smile at them as they passed. A belated whippoorwill ran with them, hidden in the tall grass, crying, "Here they come! Here they come!" Near the camp, a young boy, oh, that was the young boy from the picture, jumped from the bushes and ran ahead on the path, crying, "Here they come!" People ran from tents and campfires, excited, happy, eager, crying, "Moon Maidens! Hunor and Magor have captured Moon Maidens!" They were surrounded, exclaimed over, marveled at. The story of how they found the maidens had to be told. Only the boy who saw them coming was suddenly quiet. He stood apart from the crowd, motionless, rigid, gazing ahead with wide open eyes, his face very pale. Hunor noticed the boy. He walked over to him and laid his hands gently on his head. "Why do you look at us so strangely, Damos?" he asked. The boy pointed a shaking finger at the Moon Maidens. "The white herons, I saw them last night." His voice was hardly more than a whisper, yet it brought a hush over the crowd. People became serious, and women exclaimed, "He dreamed strange dreams last night. I heard him moan." She ran to the boy. "Tell us about your dream, my son." Damos shook his head. "It was not a dream, mother. I was not asleep." "What did you see, Damos? Tell us," urged Hunor. The boy began to speak haltingly in a low voice. "Last night, I went to sleep in my mother's tent. I don't know how long I had slept when I felt someone touch my eyes, and I heard a call. 'Damos, Damos, wake up and see. See and remember. Remember and speak.' I opened my eyes. There was no one in the tent, and it was very dark outside. I heard the call again. Then I went out. There was a light by the altar, and I saw an old man standing on the steps. I have seen him before someplace, but I cannot remember where or when. He was very tall, taller than Hunor, taller than Magor. His hair was long and white, and his eyes." The boy faltered for a moment. Then his voice grew stronger. "He called me with his eyes. He called me, and I went to him. He spoke to me again, but his voice was not the voice of a man. It came from the ground and the sky. It came from the trees and stones and from my own heart. It came from everywhere." "Nimrod!" groaned someone in the crowd. "His voice was like that." The boy went on. The voice said, "Open your eyes, Damos, and see and remember. I saw the embers on the altar glow brighter. I saw flames lick higher and higher, slim, narrow flames, pointed like swords. I followed them with my eyes, and then I saw 2 great eagles flying above. Between them flew 2 white herons, whiter than snow and slim, beautiful to behold. For a long time they flew together. Then I lost sight of them. Again I heard the voice. See, Damos, and remember. I saw one eagle and one white heron. Then they seemed to merge. Look at these eagles. Look at the white herons. This is Damos's crazy, potentially psychedelically infused dream that he's tweaking out with in the woods. And everyone thinks it's Hunor and Magor's father, Nimrod, coming back to send a vision. Perhaps it is. I heard the voice. Hear, Damos, see, hear and remember. I heard the clash of swords and the whine of flying arrows. I heard thundering hoofbeats and the battle cry of warriors. I saw the white eagle change color, become red as blood. He swooped down until his talons touched the flames and soared up again with a flaming sword clutched in his claws. The voice roared from the ground and the sky, the stones and the trees. Damos, remember and speak. The boy stopped. He was trembling like a leaf, as if the cloak of magic had fallen from him. He stood there, frightened, tired, just a little boy again. Once more, he began in a whisper. I was frightened. Everything became dark and I ran, I don't know where. When light came, I saw Hunor and Magor. The white herons perched on their shoulders. I cried, here they come. And suddenly, his voice broke and he finished with a childish sob. And suddenly, there weren't any white herons, only pale-faced girls with yellow hair. And now I can't see anything. He stumbled forward, groping with his hands. Mother, where are you? Hunor sprang forward and caught the boy in his arms. He looked into his eyes intently. Then he turned to the silent, awed crowd. The child is blind. He has seen what no human eyes can see, the future, and its glare has blinded him. Do not grieve for him, for now we have a prophet, one who will warn us and guide us, one who, like my father Nimrod, saw the coming of Attila. He turned to the boy's mother. Lead him to the tent and let him rest. An old warrior spoke now. The boy saw more than that, Hunor. He saw the mating of twin eagles, the twin eagles of Hudor, with white herons or moon maidens. Now everyone looked at the strange maidens. They were standing quietly under a tree, unfrightened, smiling and talking to each other. Strange, pale maidens with golden hair. Hunor and Magor had brought them. The twin eagles of Hadur had found them. Slim, graceful maidens, beautiful to behold, with their wispy white garments spread out like the wispy feathers of white herons or the rays of the pale moon. But they were warm and friendly like any human girl. White herons or moon maidens, fairies or humans. Who were they? Who could tell? In the meantime, the moon maidens ceased to be the cause for wonder and curiosity. From the day when Hunor and Magor had brought them to the camp, children of the tribe followed them wherever they went. They were so beautiful and gay. Women of the tribe came to love them. They were so gentle and winning. Men respected them. They could heal the wounded and ease the sick. They learned to speak the language of the tribe and were called by the names Damos, the blind boy gave them. Tunde and Sila. Tunde in Hungarian is a very nice name. Tunder is fairy, and Tunde, I believe it comes from Tunder. Damos was happy only when he was near Tunde. For hours he would sit by her side and listen to her singing. Her voice is as soft as the downy wings of a bird, he would say, and then people remembered again his dream of white herons. He was held in respect and awe, for he was not given the power to see the future. For was he not given the power to see the future? So it was Damos who lighted the torch of marriage for the wedding of Hunor and Tunde, of Magor and Sila. It was Damos who poured clear spring water on their hands, joined over the flaming torch. His eyes could not see them, but he could hear their simple, sacred vows. Through fire and water I come to thee. Not fire nor water shall take me from thee. And it was Deimos who, 12 moons later, carried Hunor's son up the altar steps and held him high for everyone to see. It was Deimos who, on that day, named him Bendiguz, the white eagle. Bendiguz, a common Hungarian name to this day. Bendiguz, a lot of people name Benda. Bendy or Benda, Benda. I know a guy named Benda Bensa, but that's not Bendiguz. His first name is Bensa. 15 years have passed. 15 peaceful years for the tribe by the misty blue lake. Young Bendiguz grew into a tall, brawny boy. To be brawny is to be like strong. Think like Gendry in Game of Thrones. He's very brawny. Who could ride the wildest horses. Who could shoot as straight and true as the best hunters. Boys of his age, and even those who were much older, soon accepted him as the best among them. When he was 10 years old, the peaceful years for the tribe came to an end. A rainless, windy spring was followed by a dry and sultry summer. Green pastures turned a dusty brown. Leaves hung limp on the drooping branches. Fruit blackened and dropped shrunken to the ground. Day after day, the sun came up a sullen red and flooded the valley with shimmering, deadly heat. Spring ceased to flow, and the water in the lake receded, leaving evil-smelling slime on its banks. Game deserted the stricken land, traveling toward the west in droves. People grew gaunt and hollow-eyed. Many of them became ill. They remembered the dark days in the wild mountains, the suffering, the starvation, and they knew that the time had come to move once more. No one questioned the command of Hunor and Magor to pull up the tents to prepare for a long journey again. Old and young worked in the relentless heat, and one day at dawn the caravan stood ready. But they were not one great, united, but nameless tribe as when they had followed Hunor and Magor out of the wilderness of Altain Ula. In the long, peaceful years, a slight but gradually widening rift had appeared in their once unbroken loyalty to the two brothers. The more reckless, adventurous among them looked for guidance to Hunor. Hunor, who knew no fear and had no pity for the weak. Others loved the sober, gentle, serious Magor. The birth of Bendiguz made the rift still deeper, until now both brothers had a following who would take command from no one but their own chosen leader. They called themselves Huns and Magyars. They called themselves Huns and Magyars now. And so they called themselves Huns and Magyars now. And so they left the once happy, fertile valley. Still brother tribes united by one purpose and one belief, but ready to separate at the will of their leaders. Hunor and Magor were hardly aware of this. Twin eagles of Hadur, they rode together, spurred boots touching, their eyes turned toward the promised land. Only at Hunor's side now rode his son, fierce, fearless, young Bendiguz. Often on the long journey, he left his father's side to ride ahead, far, far ahead of the slowly moving caravan, his fair hair flying, his short white cape streaming out behind him in the wind like great wings. It was at these times that the words of Nimrod lived again in the hearts of old warriors. After Hunor and Magor are gone, there shall be another leader, and it will be his son, greatest of all, with the mighty voice and wings red as blood, who will lead you into the promised land. Here he was, trying out his wings, the white eagle, Bendiguz. Okay, that was part 2. The twin eagles of Hador, and the next chapter, which we'll get to perhaps next week, is the white eagle of the moon. So we see this story unfolding. Hunor and Magor, they lead their people out of the old land of their father Nimrod into this new settlement by this river. It seems like a paradisical place at first, but eventually the problems of the old settlement begin to set in. It is not the promised land that they have found. And I think they've probably known that all along, because we can see very early on, they're looking, they're searching, they're trying to find this miraculous stag, this Chodasarvas, to lead them again somewhere else, back to where they had seen the first time on their hunt. But they can't find the way without this harbinger, this eagle, this stag. So Hunor and Magor, they have this settlement, and then a new son comes into the picture, Bendiguz, and he seems to be the fulfillment of Nimrod's prophecy that eventually there will be someone to lead the tribe into the promised land. It's very interesting and sort of a classical story, an origin story of a people that the Hungarians have here, obviously infused with its own unique Hungarian flavor. And we can see here Hunor and Magor become the two tribes, the Huns and the Magyars. And I'm very excited to see how this story unfolds. I mean, we also have the Moon Maidens, Tunde and Sila, who become the wives. I forget which one goes with which, but either way, Hunor and Magor, lucky guys. They're just wandering through the woods following this deer, and they stumble upon these hedonistic fairies that are willing to go off with them. I mean, maybe it was more of a rape and pillage type thing, but in this romanticized, idealized version of the story, they just gave themselves up like that. So now they come back with the people, and there's this prophetic vision with this boy who saw this dream, and he seems to be tweaking out a little bit. And unfortunately, he goes blind. I mean, poor kid, but Hunor says, okay, he's a prophet now, and everyone loves and reveres and respects him, so maybe it's not all that bad. Either way, they are now primed to go out into the next part of this journey, this migration, which we know is probably going to lead them to the promised land of Magyarország, the Carpathian Basin, the flat plain, the valleys, the lush and verdant meadows and springs. But we're not quite there yet. We'll get there eventually. And we can see there's some rift developing between the two tribes here. We have the Hunor tribe. The Hunor tribe, they say that it's more maybe harsh and brutal, and then the Magor tribe is like sober and serious. And there's some sort of rift developing. Bendiguz seems like he's the promised one. Set the table for next week. Please, if you're watching, if you're out there, come join, come feel free to talk into the chat room. I think we're going to go to some Hungarian poetry perhaps right now. And we shall read a couple of poems. I think it's 8:03. We got about 25 minutes left. I hope the stream's up there on YouTube and Facebook. If it's not, I apologize. But if it is, come, chat, join, talking with Willie. You're more than welcome. Okay, let's see what we have here today. This is a book that I found in my house. The old woman who used to live there, unfortunately, she died. But she left behind a treasure trove, a library of old books. This one is Magyar Versek Könyve, Hungarian poetry book. Oh, we have a little inscription here on the upper corner. Can't make that out, but it does say 1963. 1963. The day that John F. Kennedy died was in 1963. My mother was too. Magyar Versek Könyve, Hungarian poems. They've got these cool little ink designs on the pages there. I love this in old books, that you can really get all sorts of different representations of arts. Okay, this one's called Egy Katona Ének. Egy Katona Ének. Something about soldiers. Katona is soldiers. Vitézek, mi lehet ez szeles föld felett, szebb dolog az végeknél. Holott ki keletkör, az sok szép madár szól, kivel ember útján él, mező jó illatot, az ég szép harmatot, áld ki kedves mindennél. Ellenség hírére vitézenek szüve, Gyakorta ott felbuzdul, süt azon kívül is, csak jó kedvéből is. Vitéz próbálni indul, holott sebessedik ül, fog vitézkedik, homlokán vér lecsordul. Véres zászlók, állatlobogós koppáját, vitézek ott viselik. Roppant sereg előtt távol, az sík mezőt, széllel nyárgálják, nézik. Az pár duckapakkal, fényes sisákokkal, forgókkal szép mindenik. Jó szerecsen, lovak állatok ugranak, hogyha trombita riad. Küzdök ki strászát, áll ki lováról leszáll. Nyugszik reggel, hol virat, midőn éten éjjel. Csata viselesel, mindenik lánkát s farat. Az jó híret nevert, s az szép tisztességért. Ők mindent hátra hadnak, emberségről példát, vitézségről formát. Mindeneknek ők hadnak, midőn, mint jó solymok, mezőn széllel járnak, vágdalkoznak, futtatnak. Ellenséget látvan, örömmel kiáltvan, ők koppiákot törnek, s hangsúlyosan vagyon az dolog harcokon, szolitatlan megtenek. Sok vérben fertőzvén, arcorréja tervén, őzött sokszor megvernek. Az nagy, széles mező, az szép liget erdő, sétáló palotájok. Az utaknak lese, kemény harcok helye, tanuló oskolójok. Csattan való éjség, szomjúság, nagy hívség, s fáradtság, mulattások. Az éles szabjákán örvendeznik merten, mert ők fejeket szednek, viáddal helyeken, versesen, sebekben, harva sokan feküsznek, sok vád madár gyomra gyakran koporsója, vitézül hot testeknek, ó, végbelieknek, ifjú vitézeknek, dicséretes serege. Kiknek ez világon, szerte szerint vagyon, mindeneknél jó neve, mint sok fát gyümölccsel, sok jó szerencsékkel, áldjon Isten mezőkbe. Okay, some sort of soldier chant there. Didn't really understand any of it, to be honest with you, but it sounded nice. Well, 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 where shall we go now? Elnézést, excuse me. We could go to the land of King Arthur. We could go to really anywhere. I don't know if there's anyone out there, actually. But if you are out there, you can talk with me now. Most lehetsz beszélgetni. Mert most azt hiszem, szeretnék mesélni történeket nektek. Mert egy nap voltam a fa alatt, és azt mondtam, hol lehet menni most? És persze, mint az mindig, azt mondtam, lehet menni a gyógyfürdőre. Igen, és miért nem? A gyógyfürdő mindig jó. És sétáltam a folyó mellett, és azt láttam a gyönyörű étterem, a klasszikus magyar csáta, és azt mondta, talán lehet enni. és urtam, és rendeltem gulyás, és rendeltem a sört, és írtam, és ettem. És utána azt hitte, talán most lehet menni gyógyfürdőre. És sétáltam a gyógyfürdőre, és amikor elindul, nem elindul, de megelkezdtem a gyógyfürdőn, azt megolvasok. Király Arthur és a hercegek. King Arthur and his knights. I think last time we were, let's see. On to, which one was it? A Hunt in Fairyland. And now we shall go to the Rescue of Nemu. Page 79. I'm going to do a little bit of a mixed reading here. We're going to do some English and some Hungarian. Let's just check this page count. I think this will be the last story that we have time for today. 79, 79 toll, the Rescue of Nemu. And it lasts, let's see. Well, it's a short one. All right, cool. The Rescue of Nemu. Oh, hark, oh, hear, how thin and clear, and thinner, clear, farther going. Oh, sweet and far from cliff and scar, the horns of Elfland faintly blowing. King Pellinore, oh, King Pellinore, that huge knight, Giganticus Herzeg, who once nearly killed Arthur Király, and then took a place at the round table and made the great vow, had many adventures in his day. But the one you are going to hear about was the greatest of them all. You remember that he had galloped off at full speed after the fairy hunt. As he galloped, he swore to himself that he would save the pretty, weeping lady who had been carried off by the Fekete Herzeg, and who would bring her back in safety from the enchanted forest. He had become separated from King Arthur, and was now quite alone among the trees of this strange place. But just in front of him, he could still hear the baying and yelping of the Hatvan, coal-black Kutya. He rode on as fast as he could, and then something happened that would have amazed another knight, but did not surprise King Pellinore at all, because he had known such a thing to happen before. The baying of the hounds suddenly became muffled and strange, as if they had disappeared inside a cave. The king turned a corner, and there in front of him stood a great beast that was not like a lion. Vaj medve, és nem vaj sarkon, nor minden, de a világ. Alt és megnézett önt. Ezelőtt, turning around and lumbering away, crashing through the undergrowth, with as much noise as a hippopotamus would have made. And through the mouth of the beast there still came the muffled baying of the hounds. This strange monster had swallowed them all, but they seemed still to be hunting the fairy stag in the middle of the beast's inside. King Pellinore gave a great shout, for he had been hunting this beast all his life, and knew that he would probably go on hunting it until after he died, and never be able to kill it after all. But meanwhile he followed it hard through bush and brier, often losing sight of it, but always hearing the strange, muffled music of the Tundesh Kutyak. At last the beast disappeared altogether, and he saw a lady sitting by a fountain, who showed him the path that he must take through the enchanted forest, and told him that already the Fekete Herzeg, the Black Knight, and the pretty, weeping maiden had gone that way. So then King Pellinore knew that in following the beast, he had come in the right direction for the fulfillment of his vow. He heard the hounds still baying, but a long, long way off as he hurried down the path shown him by the lady. In a very few minutes he reached a clearing in the wood, where two beautiful tents, Gynyuru Shatorok, one blue, és one vörös, were set up opposite each other in the flickering lights and shadows of the trees. At the door of one of these tents stood the maiden he had come to save, and on the trodden grass in the middle of the clearing, the Black Knight on the black horse was doing battle with sword and shield against another knight who seemed almost as big and strong as his enemy. King Pellinore poised his spear in his raised hand, and galloping forward drove his way between them. "Oh, now," he cried, "how is this? Who are you both that you fight in this way for the lady yonder, who belongs to neither of you, but came of her own will to ask the protection of Arthur Kirai?" Fekete Herzeg had pulled his nage low onto its haunches, but he shouted back at King Pellinore, whom he did not know as one of the knights of the Round Table. "The lady is mine," cried the Fekete Herzeg. "This foolish fellow here is trying to steal her from me, but she is mine. I fought Kirai Arthur for her, and I conquered him." "That is not true," shouted King Pellinore, and his voice in its anger rang all through the forest. "I was there and I saw it all. You carried the lady away before a single knight of the Round Table had time to spring to arms and do battle for her. But every man of Arthur's court knows you have no right to her. I have followed the coal-black hounds and the beast which swallowed the hounds all the way through this enchanted forest to take this lady back again. Come, meet me here in this open space of grass, and we will soon see which is the better man." Then the Black Knight rushed upon King Pellinore, and with their swords and shields and spears they fought until the forest rang with the noise. But the king was soon the conqueror. He killed the Black Knight's horse, and when he saw his enemy lying on the crushed turf, he also sprang to the ground to finish the fight fairly on foot. And finish it he did, for he cut off the wicked Black Knight's head. Then the other knight, who had watched the battle from a little distance, came forward gladly and told King Pellinore to take the lady back to Arthur's court. I was but trying to save her from the Black Knight," he said. "I knew that he had no right to her." And he brought out a fresh, strong horse that had been tethered to a tree and put King Pellinore's saddle and bridle upon it, and said he would care for the tired, hot horse which had been in the battle. Then he went up to the door of the tent and, giving his hand to the lady, led her forward. The lady had stopped crying now, and had let down her veil and wound her hood about her head, so that King Pellinore could not see her face. He lifted her into the saddle before springing up in front of her, and as she lay for an instant in her powerful arms, there seemed to rise to his nostrils the perfume of wild roses and violets washed in dew. How lightly she seemed to sit behind him, too. His big horse took no count of her extra weight as it trotted off through the trees where the night shadows were gathering and the stars already twinkling high above the boughs. On and on rode King Pellinore and the lady until it was quite dark. Then he stopped his horse and lifted her down and guarded her while she slept under the trees. He was almost surprised to see in the morning that she was still there, because he guessed she was more than half a fairy, and unlike an ordinary mortal. When they rode on again and passed out of the enchanted forest, he wondered if she would take wing like a moth or a pilango and remain behind. But she did not. And when the sun was high in the sky, both king and lady rode safely into the courtyard of the castle at Camelot. The King Arthur and Sir Gawain, who, having soon lost the sound of the fairy hunt, had returned without encountering any adventures worth recording, Fucking Sir Gawain. And all the rest came out to meet them, and welcomed the lady right gladly, and gave praise and honor to King Pellinore. But the lady was still veiled, and at last King Arthur turned to her with courtesy. "You will find shelter and happiness forever at my court," said he. "The knights of the Round Table will be at your service, always ready to protect you, and never failing to honor you. But you came and went almost as swiftly, and with as much surprise to us as the fairy hunt itself, to which somehow I think you half belong. Will you then let us now see your face?" Then the lady threw back her veil and hood and showed her pretty radiant face to the king and all his knights. The knights murmured in admiration, for she was very, very najon beautiful, bomba. But the king cried out with joy, for he knew her now as he had not known her when the Black Knight carried her away. "You are sweet Nemu," he exclaimed. "You are she who showed me the barge in which I rode to take my sword Excalibur from the hand that held it above the water. You are one of those wonderful beings who love the world of knighthood, one of the ladies of the lake." Nemu smiled and let her veil fall again before she answered. "Yes, I am Nemu, a lady of the lake," said she. "And you have fulfilled your promise to me, King Arthur. From today, I shall never be far away from you. With the other ladies, my fairy friends, I will come and go between the enchanted forest and the royal and knightly court of Camelot." All right, King Pellinore, the former enemy of King Arthur, now accepted into his service and becomes one of his most loyal and trusted subjects of the Round Table. Unlike fucking Gawain, Gawain just goes out. It's like, I can't hear anything, goes back home. King Pellinore goes out, rescues the Lady Nemu, who was the very same lady that had brought Arthur to claim his ancestral sword of Excalibur and become the rightful king. And now he repays that debt. So we see a real theme of loyalty here. Loyalty is, I think, an intrinsic and inherent sort of traits in the British origin story, in the British lore. We see the King Arthur, the Arthurian cycle. That is sort of the British origin story right here. And in my iPad, I apologize, I don't have quite as beautiful of a book as this, but I'm sure there's one lurking out there in the mists of the Hungarian origin story. Both of these transcribed and written by later authors into sort of a childlike prose that's meant for children in the 1930s. I think I'd hearken to guess the Hungarian story was written in 1937. I bet you that this one is about the same time. Let's see. King Arthur and his Knights, based on Morte d'Arthur of Sir Thomas Malory. The Morte d'Arthur, that's what's very interesting about the King Arthur cycle. It's not even British originally. It was a French tale. Sir Thomas Malory telling it in his own way, compiled and arranged by Elizabeth Lodore Merchant, head of Department of English, William Penn High School, Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. Illustrated by Frank Godwin. Copyright 1927, that's right. So this book coming out 10 years earlier than this one. But either way, this interwar style is consistent through both with the illustrations and the style of writing, really. And we can see this sort of idea of this myth, how important myth is. And I think the myth is an incredibly, incredibly powerful and potent and important theme that can be touched upon, particularly nowadays when we're sort of searching through this chaotic, in many ways dystopic world that seems to have no semblance to anything that came before it. But what we have to remember is through every age, there is constantly chaos. That's really the only constant there is chaos. And we have these myths which have been dug up through the sands of time, retold in the 1920s, in between two world wars, which is far more chaotic, I'd argue, than anything that we have to suffer from today, and used to help parse and sift and piece together puzzles from the madness. And I hope that these myths can help bring some sort of clarity and a sense of purpose to you as you hear them. And maybe they're just entertaining, because that's what myths are at the end of the day. They're just ways to sort of entertain. But I think there's definitely lessons here to be gleaned. I mean, the ones in the King Arthur story perhaps are a little bit more obvious. Maybe that's also just recency bias since I just read it. But either way, you see this idea of loyalty, which is so strong and intrinsic, and repaying your debts and being rewarded by keeping friends close and enemies closer. This King Pellinor, him and Arthur, they were foes, and now look how great of a connection they have forged. But also with the Hungarian tale, with Hunor and Magor, this idea of fulfillment of an ancestral right, of the power that has been bequeathed to you. Not necessarily one that you asked for. I'm sure that Hunor and Magor did not want their father to die. But now that he has, and they have to lead their people into this perceived promised land. So as we wrap things up here on another great edition of Çığırtlık Éjszaka Történetiydő, I would like to give out one more toast. Yes, that's me. Hello there, Boldizar Pénzes. What's going on, Boldizar? Egészségedre, Boldizar. How are you doing? Hogy vagy? Boldizar Pénzes. That's a great name. Boldizar Pénzes. I would like to raise a toast to you, Boldizar Pénzes, and to my great aunt Susan. My grandmother's sister unfortunately passed away last week, but she was an English professor and really bequeathed to me a great love and appreciation of books. To the great Aunt Susan and to Boldizar Pénzes, Egészségedre. I wish you all the best in the week ahead as we head into this first weekend of November, as the rain is falling outside and the weather and the cold reality of winter start to set in. We will always have stories to get us through. So, szép estét, jó éjszakát, have a great night, au revoir, and Shabbat Shalom. And I will see you here next week, Thursday night, Çığırtlık Éjszaka Történetiydő.